I'd like to, my name's Toby Heaps. I'm the CEO and editor of Corporate Nights. It's a sustainable economy, research, and media. And it's my great pleasure. Can everyone hear me okay? It's okay? Okay. It's my great pleasure to welcome everybody here today in the audience, the speakers, signatories to the Action Declaration, and the media that's joining us both here and virtually through the broadcast. I'd also like to thank the Global Wind Energy Council for kindly hosting today. I think it's apropos given the winds of change that are blowing and accelerating in the economy and putting us at a critical point and juncture in the struggle for avoiding climate chaos. Today, we are going to publicly release the names of over 50 companies that come from every continent, every industry, with the exception of oil and gas production, represent 2 million employees, and have collective revenues of over $900 billion US, about 1% of global GDP. These companies have come together to make the voice of business a voice that's supporting the climate action that we need. I'm really happy to be here today. There's a question of why are we doing this? And the reason we're doing this is there's a big say-do gap. There's a big say-do gap between what countries are saying they're going to do on climate and then what's actually happening. And it's a say-do gap that we can close. Is our Earth Index that Corporate Knights published earlier this year revealed the high-income countries, the rich countries, are only moving half as fast as they need to follow through on their commitments. They need to speed up and move twice as fast. You can chalk up the reason for why they're not moving as fast as they could to policy failure. 80% of the reason is policy failure. The main reason we have policy failure is the so-called official voices of business, the industry associations, who are quite influential, are in many cases blocking progress. To develop ambitious climate policy, governments need the visible support of the private sector. We can't be letting a minority of sunset, dwindling, increasingly irrelevant industries be calling all the shots. It's clear that there's a need for speed on climate action, and the good news is that while climate change is here, so are the solutions. The solutions are going faster than the problems in the economy, and they are ready to scale big time. Which is why it's all important to clear up this policy blockage. We can no longer sit idly by on the sidelines while a minority of the shrinking, desperate, vested interests hog the megaphone and hijack the voice of business. Today is the start of a new voice of business coming together to speed up the future that we need. It's my pleasure to introduce our esteemed panel. We have with us Morten Dyrholm, who's the chair of the Global Wind Energy Council and senior VP at Vestas, one of the recently ranked #1 most sustainable companies in the world, according to the Corporate Knights. I'm really happy to have with us Gwenaelle Avice-Huet from Schneider Electric, also recently ranked #1 most sustainable company in the world just a year ago. And MS Nipper from Ørsted, a beautiful transition story, and also a recently ranked #1 most sustainable company in the world. And we're also joined here by Hakan Bulgurlu, who's the CEO and president of Arçelik and Applia, which is the big association for white goods manufacturers. Before we get underway with our panel discussion, I'm going to introduce Fiona Macklin. Fiona is one of the leaders at the Race to Zero with the United Nations. She is part of the Climate Champions program and recently played a critical role in the report called The Pivot Point, which was looking at the crucial issue of how do we turn the groundswell of voluntary initiatives into the new ground rules for the global economy. So without further ado, I'll pass it to Fiona, and then we'll get our panel discussion underway.
know who they are, but the UN climate change annual well below 2 degrees, and then very rapidly to 1.5. So we're seeing this really exponential scale rising in voluntary climate action. And just with Race to Zero, which brings together essentially networks and initiatives that themselves then help to carry out individual institutions and so on to set very credible targets together to halve emissions by 2030. We've seen our campaign grow double in the last year, grow tenfold since its launch, and now it brings together over 11,000 members across the global economy, roughly representing almost 50% of GDP in total. So I say that because there is huge momentum, which is really positive, but it's not enough. And we're all here, we all know that we're still way beyond where we need to be and there's still a lot to do. And voluntary action cannot deliver the Paris Agreement. So we need this collective collaboration between non-state actors and policymakers and national governments to get there. So that's why, with Race to Zero, we recently required our members to, in addition to the credible targets that they're already setting and the requirements that we ask them for, to now align their policy activities with their net zero targets and operations so that they can close this staging gap and really demonstrate that they are proactively engaging in the sorts of policies that we need to get there. And I think it's really important to do so because it's the corporates that can provide that confidence, that can provide the strong signals to policymakers that there is appetite for this, there is appetite to go further and faster, so the national governments are empowered to really step up both their ambition and their action. And so to build as well on this 5th P our grade criteria with Race to Zero, we've also been convening 40 organisations from across the standards, the voluntary and regulatory landscape to write this bullet point report, which essentially acknowledges the need for a really dramatic acceleration in this conversion from voluntary action into the standards, regulations, policies, essentially the sort of regulatory infrastructure that is needed to deliver the transformation that we all know and want. And what this report does is essentially trying to sort of shift the paradigm away from corporates feeling like regulations and burdening them to actually helping them and empowering them to see that this is an opportunity for them to help drive, shape, influence policies to their benefit, but also to the benefit of the planet. So it outlines 3 key things that we'd love to see corporates do along with financial institutions, along with cities and regions to really help drive the shift in policies. And that's first of all calling on the harmonisation of standards that are still really fragmented and quite different, which leads to confusion, but also the creation of enabling new policies that will really help unlock this voluntary action. And actually, of course, that is in line with different country capacities, different needs, but doing so as a collective will really help ensure a just transition as well. And thirdly, actually, importantly, the removal of hindering regulations that is currently strangling and preventing this ambitious voluntary action. So removing those will still enable and further spark leadership at the national level, which is so critical. So that's why it's so exciting to welcome this launch of the Action Declaration today and see this momentum start gathering. We look forward to see that grow exponentially. So really excited to be listening in on this panel of representatives who are leading this transition. And with that, I will hand over to you.
Thanks, Fiona. That was a great context setter. We're going to have a brief panel discussion now. We'll start with Morten Dyrholm from Vestas. Morten, why is Vestas supporting the Action Declaration?
Thank you, and we are proudly supporting this because we're the world's largest wind turbine manufacturer, and I've had the pleasure of being a lobbyist for wind for the last 15 years. And although walking around here, it seems that the whole world is aligned with us and where we want to go. That's definitely not the case. I mean, we are up against enormous amounts of money in the fossil fuel sector and lobbying power that is way, way beyond what we can throw in our industry. And we just have to realize that those actors are not going to step aside voluntarily. You know, we have to convince businesses to not support these associations that are lobbying against the deployment of renewables. And that will take a very, very solid group of companies, such as the one in the coalition here, to start that movement. Because I can give you just an example of what is happening. I mean, we talk about the barriers that are in our way right now. I mean, everyone's happy here to come with big pledges and hundreds of gigawatts of wind and renewables are being sounded out now as the world is really moving in the right direction. But on the ground, I can tell you that's not what's happening. I mean, projects are being blocked by administrative barriers all across the world. The permitting processes for getting wind, and you know that as well, Mads, it can take 7-10 years from a project idea to a project execution. And a lot of the reason for that is because governments are in our way. The administrative barriers that are in our way is just become so cumbersome that action on the ground is really not happening to the pace that it needs to be. One of the reasons for that is that we have very powerful lobbying groups against us that spews out disinformation about renewables at a very rapid click, about how renewables make you sick, how wind turbines give you cancer. You know, you've heard all of these strange disinformation pieces that are coming out. And that is not accidental. A lot of that is happening because there are active groups that has an interest in spewing out this disinformation. And that, of course, makes people concerned. And that goes directly into policymakers' permitting processes, and that prolongs our ability to actually scale our industry. So this is a real threat for us, and this is something we have to counter. And this is just one example. There are hundreds of examples of lobbying power that is stacked against us. And we have to first really scale up our own lobbying power. And Mads, you're one of the biggest vocal voices out there for the industry, and I think we need all the CEOs of our industry to really step up this game. We need to put more money into our industry associations and the right organizations. Then we can change things, and then we need to change these organizations from within. One very good example of that is how Eurelectric, a very famous industry body in Europe, changed from being black to green, because there was an active movement in Eurelectric from these companies to turn it around. So we can do it with many other organizations to get more organizations on our side. And that's why we're part of this coalition. We need to put focus on that. It's important.
Thanks, Morten. Hakan?
Well, first of all, I'm proud that we're one of the first 57. But as I told you earlier, it needs to be 57,000, right? We need to get there quite quick. As Arçelik, we have voluntarily been doing more than we've been required by regulation for a long time now. We lead the Dow Jones Sustainability Index. The reason for that mainly is because we have tried to decarbonize as fast as we could, and we've created energy efficiency around the world, even though it wasn't regulated. A good example is South Africa. We switched to selling only the highest energy rating possible appliances, even though we were not required to do so, and the market was a much lower energy rating product. The savings that resulted in the past 6-7 years since we've done that are huge, equivalent to a few coal-fired power plants, and that's completely voluntary. In all of this, I saw an absence of regulation, an absence of harmonization of basically standards, which has been hindering us. A global company like us, we have to operate under standards wherever we are. And I think last year at COP, my main takeaway was that business now has gotten ahead of government in terms of action being taken. There are several reasons for that. One, I think it makes good business sense. Consumers will start voting with their money on companies who have the right product and services by the planet, and penalizing the others. So this natural selection has started. But the main reason is that we're actually running out of time. We all know that we're far behind where we need to be. So I really am proud of being part of this action, and you for putting this together, because it is time that business influences government much more. And I think we have the power to do that. Wearing my Arçelik hat, wherever I go, whether it's Pakistan, South Africa, Bangladesh, I'm constantly pushing for tighter regulation, especially around energy efficiency. I'll continue to do so. Now I have a different responsibility. I also run the industry association, and I think I got elected on that mandate too. So there's hope. I mean, change is coming. It's coming fast. This is just a beautiful way of declaring it. So thank you for having us as part of it.
Thanks, Hakan. Gwenaelle?
Thank you very much. I would like to talk a little bit of Schneider Electric. We've been awarded #1 like 2 years ago in corporate minds, and we are very proud of that. But this is a matter of 15 years of investment. Now everybody is talking about sustainability, but in reality, 15 years ago, we took the decision to have sustainability as a core of our strategy.
And I think it gives you a sense of the level of maturity that requires sustainability. All the products that we release today, it's because 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we were investing in research and development. One example, we just been announcing at a Climate Week in New York, one product that is removing SF6, which is a huge emitter for our products, electrical products for breakers. This is investments of 10 years. It's just to show that sustainability takes a lot of time, a lot of investments, and we need to go for it. So any year that we are not investing in it, it's a year that is lost. So this is the first element. Schneider took long level of maturity, and therefore we consider our role not only investing for our own products, but much broader for our whole ecosystem. So that's why we're working with a lot of governments, for example, with policymakers. We were, for example, discussing a lot with Biden administration on the First Mover Coalition that has been launched by Kerry, because we thought that at the end of the day, what matters is reconcile policymakers with the industry, working all together in the same direction. So a lot of interaction with policymakers. We have also built a sustainability research institute so that we can develop, scenarios. Everybody's talking about electrification today because there is a huge energy crisis. How fast can we go? We need to develop scenarios and go straight buildings, industry, homes, etc. to see segment by segment what's achievable in what time frame with what technology and what investment. That's how we see our position, not only at developing products and investing in research and developments, but creating coalition, developing scenarios, bridging the gap with policymakers, and at the end of the day, it's working with our partners and our suppliers. Just to give you a thought of figures, today around the world you have 3,000 companies in discussion with SBTi. 3,000 companies, huge. But in reality, how many have been approved SBTi across the world value chain 1.5 degree scenarios? Only 85, and we are among the 85. So you see, we need to bridge all together. We need to create this momentum so that at the end of the day, it's not 85 that have been approved. It should be the 3,000 that I was talking about.
Thanks, Gwenaelle. Mats?
Yes. Thank you. Oh, thank you very much. Now, thank you. As a CEO of a global company, I'm faced with many difficult, really difficult decisions. This was not one of them. To join this movement, and thanks to you, Toby, for starting it and for supporting it. But I think the fact is, like Morten said, is that we are moving radically fast. I mean, we are seeing lots of action, and there's plenty of reason to be optimistic. But there are admittedly also lots and lots of reasons to be pessimistic, because we are not moving fast enough. And in many ways, it is, if you talk to any politicians, not everybody in the world, there are still people up for election who are essentially fighting, still fighting against what needs to get done. But the real enemy is what Morten described, is a little bit like, and pardon the inappropriate analogy, is a little bit like fighting terrorism. You don't know who the enemy is. Talk to any politician in the world, they will say we are all for it. We need to make things faster, we need to have realistic business cases, there needs to be financial sustainability, we need to build out and pact with nature, protect biodiversity, all the words are right. And then when the realities hit, they're different. And in many cases, I actually thought it's because the politicians don't have the courage to do away with the civil servants who in many cases are there to protect their own jobs in many cases. But what is dawning to us is that invisible enemy of industry associations, of individual companies with enormous lobbying resources are a huge root cause of why this continues to bring complexity in. I mean, Denmark, we are bidding in to build what we thought was going to be the world's first energy island with 10 gigawatts of wind around it. Now it will likely not be that, because it takes years and years and years to get that consenting. Today it takes longer to get approval to build an offshore wind farm than it takes to actually build it, which is a complete disgrace. Complete disgrace. And we cannot allow that to happen. And that is why we at Ørsted we are happily committing to say, what are the industry associations we are part of? We are working on a sort of a policy advocacy report where we'll publicly disclose not only what are we doing, but what are we arguing. And we are also engaging deeply in not only the like-minded industry associations, but also the broader industry associations, which in many cases, they go for the least common denominator and say we need to serve all our members, which means that the opinions often get washed out. I'm happy to say I was the vice chairman of Danish Confederation of Industries, which is now a vivid advocate for climate change. But it takes a long and sustained effort. And we need to do away by fighting ourselves, because a few years ago, as a matter of fact, what was just said, there was a fight between should it be energy efficiency or should it be accelerating renewable power. That is a total nonsense discussion. It of course needs to be both, and we need to fire on absolutely all cylinders. And we need as businesses to push policymakers, we need to push our industry associations, and we need to have the courage to be vocal voices, even though we will in many cases end up getting enemies. But that is a price worth paying.
Thank you, Mads. I have two questions, and I was wondering, I would really love to get your perspective kind of across the board on both those questions. The first question is, a lot of people believe in the green economy, but a lot of people think it's a fairy tale. They think it's little, it's tiny. You guys know otherwise. And this idea that you need high carbon to be economic mojo is a pervasive myth. And I'd love to get your perspective on how we shatter that myth, number one. Number two, a lot of people think that the voice of business is coherent. But we know that the solution providers for climate solutions, companies like Vestas and Ørsted, Schneider Electric, are now twice as powerful by economic clout than the fossil fuel industry. We know that. The fossil fuel industry is about 6% of global market cap. These companies are 12% of global market cap when you add them all together. And we also know that about 40% of the stock market now supports SBTI. So why aren't we hearing those voices from our industry associations and the voice of business? And why aren't those voices louder? So maybe start with you, Matt.
Yeah, I'll be happy, and I'll start maybe a little bit from the reverse side of it. I think it's because we are still novices in policy advocacy. And in many ways, I mean, our company, which went from being one of Europe's most fossil fuel utilities to being now 90% based on renewables and soon 100%, is because we got the local politicians, especially in Denmark and UK, to play with us. And we got used to that being sort of excellent, the society is with us. Only to find out when that really needed to be scaled globally, we started to hit barriers with people who have probably, I mean, many of these companies who are actively lobbying, they are the ones who have the resources they have behind that they've had for decades and decades, just outnumbers and outmatches what our industry typically has. And so also because I think in many cases we have been naive and said what we do is fundamentally right, so why do we need to push it? It's not that difficult. It is a fundamentally right thing to do. So, but I think the fact that we outmatch these companies in market cap, the fact that more and more people are getting that this is the right thing to do, and then I think an overlooked fact is if we can get the broadest industry associations like Business Europe and so on to not take the lowest common denominator, because there will always be laggards in any industry. And if we do away with that mindset of the lowest common denominator, I think we can dramatically accelerate the voices of the companies like Vestas and Schneider and all companies around. So.
Well, regarding your first question about the myth, I would say that first the market got to realize over time that investing in an ESG company is something that is very valuable on a profitability standpoint, and we have to show that impact company, meaning a company investing in ESG, are really having returns for the investors. That is the first element. Doing well by doing good and vice versa. We need to perform financially. And at the end of the day, we have to show that concretely ESG companies, have but performance. And that's what we used to show and we used to say. Basically, our company, Schneider Electric, was to early 2000 was developing 9 billion revenues. Today it's 30 billion revenues. So it's a huge success story. Why is that? Because since the beginning, our CEO said our core value proposition will be sustainability. Everything that we will develop will be tied to sustainability. At the beginning, when he said that, there was a lot of confusion from investors. What's sustainability about? Are you talking environment? Are you talking environment, social, governance? What's tied within your policy? And to show that not only it's based on environment, but the social pillar is as important as the environmental one. And we wanted to track everything that we were doing on a quarterly basis, and we wanted to show to investors that financially driven companies are also extra financially driven ones. And that's why every quarter we communicate the same way our financial results and our environmental, social, and governance results. And this is paying off. At the end of the day, this is paying off because we have the credibility from investors. Since 15 years ago, we have been deploying this strategy. So I think the first means, yes, I would say that by credibility, by transparency, by showing to investors what you are doing on ESG, it pays off. The second element regarding why aren't you communicating more louder or not enough loud as a private sector, I would say again, I think that we need more momentum. On the policymakers side, I would say that 13 countries around the globe have net zero commitment based on their law. 13 national countries around the globe, meaning 10% of the emissions, only 10% of the emissions. Are we doing better at a corporate level? As I was mentioning, 33,000 companies in discussion with SBTi, but only 85 that has been approved SBTi 1.5 degree scenario. So we can do more. But how to do more? We need to work with our clients. We need to work with our suppliers, not only on our own emissions. And that's what we believe and that's what we are doing. So we are embarking the whole value chain with us, and then we can have meaningful impact. One example, we were discussing with the pharmaceutical industry. They wanted to decarbonize. How to do that? Well, the big emissions are coming from their suppliers. So we were working with the world 10 top pharmaceutical industries, and we committed to decarbonize their suppliers. And that's how we will have a meaningful impact, working with our clients, with their suppliers, etc., etc. So that's how we see, how powerful can the corporates be.
I guess we'll go online. I'll try and not repeat some of the things that you mentioned, which are very true. But I think the myth has now changed. It's a reality. In fact, businesses that don't have a sustainable way of moving forward will lose out, and they'll be weeded out. And companies that have transformed earlier will have a head start, and it will be very expensive for others to catch up. So it's simply a business strategy. I mean, to keep the business alive, you have to do the right thing, and you have to do it now. There's no time left. We've done that, and we enjoy a higher growth rate than our industry because of that. I believe people are actively now choosing more sustainable products and services and pay more. All surveys I can quote actually show that, especially with young people. But when it comes to, we're very wind heavy here, but I'll use an example. Businesses don't have to clean up their services. They also actually have to decarbonize faster. And you don't have to leave it to utilities and government. Today we have about 20 of installed solar power, and we're on track to have 50 by next year and 100 in the near future. And we're not a power company. We're just committed to cover every surface we have all around the world, all 32 factories in 11 countries, with solar power, just to fulfill our own power needs. I think this is an example of prioritizing capex, which is also now happening because of maybe energy inflation, but it's a direct result. So I think the government side is one thing, but there's going to be a big pull from industry also on cleaner renewables. And when it comes to why fossil fuels are more powerful, it's because just look at the profits they had in the US, $200 billion, right? I'm sure the wind industry, whether you're on the utility side or the turbine manufacturing side, not anywhere near that, right? So lobbying is a big factor, awareness is a big factor, and I think this is where associations come into play. They really need to have face time with governments to actually put facts and truth on the table and really help with this transformation. And this is what this declaration is all about.
And actually, Hakan, just a quick follow-up, if I could, Hakan, because Arçelik's one of the most sustainable companies in the world from the emerging economies, headquartered in Turkey, operating South Africa, around the world, Bangladesh, Pakistan. It's a little bit of a different operating environment in middle-income, low-income countries. And in that context, for this action declaration, is there any kind of specific relevance to operating in the emerging?
I mean, absolutely. Coming from an emerging market, I think, and leading industry in terms of sustainability is important. I mean, we have Swedish, not in the room today, but Swedish, German, American friends who would normally expect to have that mantle. But it's just to show that any country from anywhere can do the right thing. It's not to where you come from, resources, how old the company is, and the awareness of your consumer. I think Arçelik is a good example, and we'll see more following. Sorry about the mic. Maybe.
Let's see if it works here. But what you're saying here is makes me so happy. I mean, we for 15 years, as Mads also said, the lobbying power of if you just take the core renewable industry, is very, very tiny. And every time we've come up with good arguments for deploying renewables, the fossil fuel industry is always there to counter. Back in the days when I started, it was, you're too expensive and subsidized, you're never going to amount to anything. Even though they have 100 years of entrenched interest and trillions of dollars of subsidies in the fossil fuel sector, right? Then it became, okay, when we got out of subsidies, then you're unreliable, you're going to crash the system, and obviously that has not happened. We've been able to deploy at scale and improving the security of supply at the same time. But now, today, you're making it volatile, you're causing the energy crisis, even though it's obvious to see what's causing the energy crisis. It's the fossil fuels. That's what's the volatile element here. That is what is causing higher energy prices in parts of the world at the moment. So we're just up against entrenched interest, and we need allies. And what we're getting now is allies, because sustainability is an enormously powerful tool that will come in and help the renewable industry lobby for the right thing. And the fact that what you're doing now is just so important, and what Schneider is doing is so important, because governments will now start to have to listen, because companies are demanding to procure green electrons, for example. A good example, what happened before Glasgow in Vietnam? Why did they come up with a revised energy plan? Part of the reason was that 20 companies from the US, from Silicon Valley, came to Vietnam and said, we would like to invest here in your southern part of Vietnam, but we can't procure coal power. Our sustainability targets are purely to run our factories on green electrons and whatnot. They changed their plans, and they are now on a path to a green development in Vietnam. It's just a small example, but it's the power of industry, and it's the power of the lobbying allies we're getting now in the renewable industry. It's immensely important.
Allow me to add two things inspired by what has been said. I think actually we need to be smarter in our lobbying efforts, whether it is for energy efficiency or whether it's for wind and solar power. But for example, in the US right now, instead of going out and saying we push for climate change, because quite frankly there are politicians and decision makers in the US who do not have climate change as a top 5 priority, however difficult it is to believe. But what do we then do? Instead of just shouting climate change higher, we should shout saying this is the best way to transform an aging workforce into a future-proof workforce with good paying unionized jobs. So let's be a little bit more agile in terms of how do we actually support the right advocacy by twisting it also to what is it the audience actually wants to hear, as long as we achieve the right things. And the other thing, and now I see Christopher in the room here as well, Richard reminded me that with energy efficiency and wind power, that will eventually, we will prevail. I fully agree with Hakan, we will prevail. Now the next frontier is going to be liquid fuels made from green power. And trust me, the fossil fuel industry is going to like that even less than electrification. They will hate that with a vengeance, because if we suddenly had green fuels made from green hydrogen, made from green power, then we are suddenly starting to enter very directly into the fuels target, and that is when we'll get the real firepower against us, which we have to make very deliberate strategies to sustain, because we need to decarbonize the hard-to-abate sectors as well.
So we're getting to the climax. We're going to announce the signatories, the vanguard corporations that are stepping up to be the new voice of business. I'm also happy that Canada's Minister of Environment and Climate Change, who's a long-time environmental champion, just has entered the room, Honourable Stephen Guilbeault. Welcome, Minister. Yeah. And so we're going to hear a couple of words from the Minister after we present the signatories, and then we're going to move the chairs and do a group photo in front of that wind turbine over there. So the signatories, as you can see from up there, we're not talking about little businesses. Big business is now backing a new voice for business. Businesses representing $900 billion, nearly $900 billion US dollars in annual revenues. For context, that's 1% of global GDP. These companies come from every continent. They cover the entire G7 with the exception of Japan, Brazil, India, China. These companies come from every industry, from tech to healthcare to finance to power generation. And these companies are committed to using their power, flexing their policy muscle to make sure that their direct actions support Paris-aligned policy. That's when they're talking to the policymakers, and to make sure and pay close attention to their industry associations and make sure that they're singing the same tune and not carrying on the ballad of yesterday. They've also committed, and this is important, what gets measured gets managed. They've also committed to file by the end of 2023 on a regular basis an annual sort of trade industry audit detailing the policy engagements of their own and their industry associations and how they align with Paris or do not. These are the companies, 2 million employees, $900 billion, and many of you are in the room today, many of you are joining us on Zoom, and I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for leading this charge. And this is a message. We're sending a message to leaders around the world that big business is here to back you up, and we're sending an invitation to big businesses around the world that the more the merrier, and you're welcome to join the fight. It's the good fight, and it's also going to be the one that wins. So thanks a lot. And without further ado, my great honor to welcome Honourable Stephen Guilbeault, Minister of Environment and Climate Change Canada. Stephen, Minister.
Toby, good to see you. Always good to share the stage with another long-time environmental and climate change activist. Hello, everyone. My apologies for coming in late. I was held up by the German Chancellor, so as excuses go, I think that's pretty good. I too would like to add my voice to Toby to say thank you for the companies that are here and all the companies that have registered. It is not only amazing but essential to see the private sector stepping up. In Canada, as you know, I mean, we're a large exporter of greenhouse gas. We're the fourth largest producer of oil and gas. We have a very large carbon footprint, so we are playing catch up. And for a long time, Canada wasn't doing what it should be doing. We're working really hard to change that. As some of you Canadians would know, we presented earlier this year the emissions reduction plan, what we call the ERP, which is our lighthouse. It's like this big wood turbine, but with a big light on top of it, guiding everything we do in Canada. For the first time ever, a detailed plan that shows how we will meet our 2030 targets. And they're ambitious. I know some people would like us to do more, and I would like us to do more, but people have to remember that when we came in power in 2015, we had nothing. We had no plans, we had no measures, we had no pricing on pollution, no clean fuel standards, nothing. And this year alone, we're in the process of, we've either adopted or are in the process of adopting 6 or 7 different individual pieces of regulations. We've published clean fuel regulations. we're in the process of adopting an emissions cap on oil and gas emissions. New methane regs, we're on our way to meet our 40 to 45% methane emission reduction from the oil and gas sector in 2025. We'll probably get there even sooner, but we've made a commitment to go to 75% reduction in methane for the oil and gas sector by 2030. So we're in the process of adopting those regulations, zero emission vehicle mandate, clean electricity standard. Our grid in Canada is already pretty low, about 80%, besides the fact that the microphone is dying and that there's great regional variability in terms of the grid composition in Canada. So some of our regions have a very low emitting grid, 98% clean, renewable, but other jurisdictions are only at 10%. So in some parts of the country, there's a lot of work that we need to do. So we're doing a lot of work, but we can't do it alone. And we need private sector, and we need companies like yours to step up and help us, and help you help us. It's always easier for me as Environment Minister when I come to the cabinet table and say, well, look at what the private sector are doing. Look at what these companies are doing. So I don't look like I'm alone talking about this climate change stuff by myself, when I can point to concrete examples of companies doing it and engaging their workforce and their communities to do that. So for all of these reasons, thank you so much, Toby, and thank you to all of you again, and those that are with us virtually for signing up. And anything we can do in Canada to help and support and work with you, we will do.